Well, hello again. Another yes or no question. This one is: was Martin Luther a hero? Um, well, I guess we all know that Martin Luther was he was a highly educated Augustinian monk who, in 1517, allegedly nailed his 95 theses to the door of Wittenberg Castle. Um, uh, I'm told actually that he presented them to the Archbishop, but in any case, he made public a list of 95 observations and complaints about the way the church was being run, and about what he believed was the right path to God, and the right way to demonstrate and observe true faith. And of course, that was hugely disruptive, but had an enormous impact on the rest of the world. In many respects, we're still feeling it. Um, but at the same time, it must be acknowledged that he was a man with some severe personality defects, and ones that we really simply can't ignore. So, unsurprisingly, there are people on both sides of the question about whether he was a hero or not. By the way, a certain disclaimer here. I come from several generations of Lutheran clergymen on both sides, both from my father's side and my mother's side. So you might expect that I have a previously established prejudice on this, but I don't think I really do, actually. Okay, well, let us now examine the yes people, the people who say, yes, he was a hero. I guess number one is the fact that, somewhat unusually for his time, Luther was a champion of free speech. About 4 years after his famous laying out of his principles on the 95 Theses, he was brought before the Holy Roman Emperor at the Diet of Worms, a city in Germany, which my wife and I have visited. And he was, of course, accused of heresy and so forth by the church. The Pope, Adrian VI, was denigrating in his reference to him, called him a uneducated monk, a bit reminiscent really of Henry II referring to Becket as a low-born priest. In any case, at that event, which was an important event really, not only in theological history but in history in general, Luther said, "Here I stand, I can do no other, so help me God." Took a lot of courage to say that, because of course this was in an era where if you misbehaved theologically or opposed the church, which was a megalithic, powerful institution, you could easily just disappear or be publicly burned at the stake. So it took some courage to do that. Not long after the Diet of Worms, Luther was sequestered in the castle of a like-minded person, a friend, Wartburg Castle, and in it he undertook the translation of the entire Bible, so that, in a revolutionary move, so that ordinary Germans could read the Bible and see what was in it. Now, one would think that translating the Bible into a language that parishioners can read would be a sensible and responsible thing to do. Not so in those days. It could get you killed. And in fact, Tyndale, who was inspired by Luther's translation and translated the Bible into English at about the same time, about 1535, 1536, in that area, was burned at the stake for his for his trouble. So it was a time when the church resisted any effort on the part of anyone to interpret for him or herself what the scriptures said. That was the prerogative of the church, and there wasn't going to be any argument about it. So it was a very timely thing, but also a very brave thing for Luther to do. Eventually, Luther got himself in the position where he was so famous with his various pamphlets, with the Bible itself, that the church really couldn't touch him because everyone would know who had done it. And as a consequence, that had an enormous impact. The whole notion of translating the Bible into an understandable language. Incidentally, we had this anomaly in Britain where Henry VIII was quite sympathetic to the execution of Tyndale, but 2 years later, when Henry decided he wasn't a Catholic any longer and was the head of the Church of England, then supported the use of that Bible, slightly updated by Miles Coverdale, and ordered it to be put into every church in Britain. So not only did we have violence and bad treatment accompanying Bible translations, but stunning hypocrisy on the part of Henry VIII. But that's an aside. Second, in addition to challenging the church's power, certainly its power over your soul, he also challenged what he believed to be the corrupt practices of the church. And he was not afraid to voice this in vigorous terms. His particular wrath was directed at the sale of indulgences. It's kind of an unbelievable thing as we look back upon it now, but there was a prelate traveling through Germany at the time selling time off in purgatory. These were called indulgences, and for money. And allegedly the money was being raised, of course, to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica. And Luther just couldn't stomach that. And he made his opposition to the practice stunningly clear. In a way, what Luther was doing is what Trump fatuously said he was going to do and then didn't, which was draining the swamp. So in effect, Luther was trying to drain the Vatican swamp. And he made quite a bit of headway on that. Luther's fundamental theological theme, what he enjoined people to do, was to understand that their faith was the core of their relationship with God, and they didn't need intercession. Their relationship with God was one for them to manage themselves through prayer, through worship, and so forth. And he therefore preached that the worshiping of relics, contributing to the church, attending Mass, and so forth, when one was finally had the opportunity to meet one's Maker, all of that would be irrelevant. The only thing that was important was the relationship with God through prayer. Wow, what a powerful idea that was, and certainly one that flew in the face of the church establishment. Well, finally, I guess what we can say in support of Luther's heroism was that he was really a precursor to the Enlightenment. I mean, of course, there were other forces at work, but he was advocating not only free speech, but the necessity to think for oneself, to interpret ideas and the behavior of other people in your own head, not look for someone else to tell you how you should do that. And that was a revolutionary idea, and that, of course, continued strongly for several centuries. And so one could say that Luther was one of the real pioneers in that area. Okay, well, that's a pretty long list of important accomplishments, traits, and so forth in support of his heroism. But what about the other side? What about those that say, well, no, he wasn't a hero? Well, to begin with, he was a key figure, one of the progenitors of the Reformation. And of course, if you were a member of the established church, you would say what a vile thing that was. He was the enemy. He was someone who opposed what you stood for. So, and many people still feel that way. And on a similar vein, the fact that he was one of the instigators of the Reformation led to a period of awful strife, bloodshed, pogroms of one sort or another in both directions, the Inquisition, all of that, which was really almost the shame of those the couple of centuries that followed that. So Luther has some of that to be laid at his feet. Next, he was pretty unpleasant person, irascible. He was somebody who didn't suffer fools gladly. Of course, he was very bright, very educated. And I would guess you probably would have difficulty maintaining a conversation with him. He might well have violated one of my wife's questions, would you have him around for dinner? Probably not, actually, but maybe for a few laughs. Okay, and then we come to the final great difficulty about Luther, and that was his anti-Semitism. Luther inveighed against Jews after initially failing, as he saw to encourage them to convert to Christianity. He published tracts and pamphlets, and one in particular has survived, called On Jews and Their Lies. And in it he advocates some pretty nasty stuff, burning their synagogues, confiscating their wealth, expelling them from the country, and so forth. It sounds an awful lot like, the Germany of the Nazis. And other than advocating their death, many of the similar initiatives under the Nazis seem to go back almost to Luther. And in fact, the Nazis made plenty of reference to Luther and used him as a kind of template for what they did. Well, that's pretty awful. That's something really, for anyone who is a supporter of Luther, you have to take note of that. That's not a pleasant thing. Well, there are my comments about why he shouldn't be considered a hero. What's my take on Luther? Well, I guess it's simple. There is no question that Luther's stand on freedom of speech, on opposing corruption in the church, on translating the Bible, does make him a definite hero. He was a progenitor of the Reformation. Whatever you may think of the Reformation, it was certainly something that had a lot going for it in terms of virtue and free speech, even though it can be unpleasant at times. And he was certainly one of those, and he has to be seen really as one of the pioneers of the Enlightenment. So very heroic activity on his part, but we cannot overlook the anti-Semitism. Luther was a flawed character, a deeply flawed character by our standards, and no excuse like, well, you have to realize what it was like in those days. No, sorry, that one just won't wash. He was flawed, and so therefore, as we look back on Luther and think about whether he is a hero or not, we have to acknowledge that the that the report card is a mixed one. Okay, there it is. If you like that, the usual thing, give me a like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you with the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.